Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremiah Mateo for EDUC 211, Facilitating Learning. Now we're on our seventh discussion, which is cognitive perspective. So we will first discuss our learning objectives for this lesson. So for our learning objectives, the first objective is to explain the different Gestalt psychology. The second one is to expound the processes involved in acquiring, retrieving, and storing knowledge. The third is describe the development of learners' ability to represent knowledge. And lastly, we have to articulate the benefits of using Robert Gage's psychology. So let us discuss. So what is cognitive perspective? Cognitive perspective is concerned with the mental functions such as memory, perception, attention, and others. So cognitive psychology is the study on how people are able to think, remember, and store, and so as the use of information. So it focuses on memory, intelligence, perception, thought process, problem solving, language, and learning. So, what is Gestalt psychology? So, it is the foundation of the so-called cognitive perspective to learning. So, Gestalt came from the old German word Gestalt, which means a shape, form, or an organized whole or configuration. So, there are different perceptual laws of perceptual organization in Gestalt law. So, that is law of proximity, law of similarity, law of enclosure, law of symmetry, law of continuity, law of enclosure, law of connection, and law of fine figure and ground. So let us expound each law. So the first law is the law of proximity. It describes how the human eye perceives the connection between visual elements and the elements that are close to each other. It is perceived to be related when compared with the elements that are separate from each other. The second law is the law of similarity. It's a Gestalt grouping law that states that elements that are similar to each other tend to be perceived as a unified group. Similarity can refer to any number of features, including color, orientation, size, or indeed motion. The third is the law of enclosure. We perceive objects as belonging to a group when they are enclosed in a way that creates a boundary or border around them. And the other law is the law of symmetry. Is a another Gestalt grouping law that states that elements that are symmetrical to each other tend to be perceived as a unified group. And another is the law of closure. This is also a Gestalt law that states that if there is if there is a break in the object, we perceive that the object is a continuous one, so it is as continuing in a smooth pattern. For example, in the circle below, we tend to see that complete circle with something over the top of it. We like to see as simple of a figure as possible. Same thing with the learner. So they want to learn their lessons as simply as possible. Another law is the law of continuity, which states that elements that are arranged on a line or curve are perceived to be more related than elements that are not on the line or the curve. So, and the other one is the law of connection or the principle of continuity that states that elements that are arranged on a line or curve are perceived to be more related than the elements not on the line or in the curve. So, another one is the law of programs or the good figure or law of simplicity. It states that people will perceive and interpret ambiguous or complex images as the simplest form or forms as possible. This is a fundamental principle in Gestalt, specifically in German psychology. When confronted with complex shapes, we tend to reorganize them into simpler components or into a simpler whole. So the last one is the law of figure or law of ground, which states that we can distinguish an object or the figure of the rule from the background, which is usually the ground. This rule shows that when we look at the design, we perceive that the figure from the ground is distinct and unique. Another theory for this one is called the information processing. So it is a cognitive theoretical framework which focuses on how knowledge enters and is stored in our or from our retrieved memory. Information processing theory describes how the learners receive information from the environment through the senses, and what takes place in between determines whether the information will continue to pass through the sensory register or then to the short-term memory or the long-term memory. So for our information processing theory, we have the so-called types of knowledge, which includes the general versus specific, the declarative, episodic, and procedural. We will also discuss the three stages of information processing theory, which is encoding, storage, and retrieval. So as the three main stages of memory process, which is sensory register, executive control process, and forgetting. So the types of knowledge, like what I said a while ago, so general versus specific. This involve whether the knowledge is useful in many tasks or only in one or in a specific. The second one is declarative. This refers to the actual knowledge. This relates to the nature of how things and are they maybe in word, image form, such as the name, age, or address of a specific learner or a specific person. The third is the procedural. So this knowledge refers on how to do things that require steps. So for example is making syllabus or lesson plans. Another one is episodic. This knowledge includes memories of life events such as your birthday or your graduation. And the last one is conditional. This knowledge is about knowing when and why to apply the declarative or the procedural knowledge. So for the three stages of information processing theory, we have encoding. It is the information that is sent and received and is attended to the storage or the mind of a person. The second part is the storage. Yeah, it is the information that is stored for either short or long period of time. And the last one is retrieval. It is the information that is brought back at the appropriate time and reactivated for use on a current task. So this is the true measure of effective memory. So the three main stages of memory process. So most of the theories of information processing revolve around the three main stages of memory process. So the first one is the sensory register. This holds all the sensor information. So it can be classified into two: for a brief time or short-term memory, or what we call STM. This can hold only for 5 to 9 chunks of minutes of 9 chunks of information. It maintains the information for a limited time of 18 seconds or less until the learner has the adequate resource to process information or until it is forgotten. The second one is long-term memory. Is the final and the permanent storing house of memory information. It has unlimited capacity and indefinite duration. It holds the stored information until it is needed again. The second stage of memory process is called executive control process. This involves the processor, or what is referred to as a metacognitive skill. So these processes guide the flow of information through the system that help the learner make informed decision about how to categorize, organize, or interpret information. The third and the last stage of memory process is called forgetting. So it is the inability to retrieve or access information when it is needed. So there are two ways which forgetting takes place. First is decay of information when it is not attended or eventually fades away. And this is prevalent in working memory. And we also have the interference or new or old information that blocks the access to the information in the question that is currently asked or needed to be solved by the learner. So another theory for this lesson is Robert Gage's condition of learning. So Robert Gage's condition of learning is divided into actually five parts or essential parts, which is number one is the verbal information. The next one is intellectual skills. Then the cognitive strategies, attitudes, and motor skills. So let us expound each. So Robert Gage's theory stipulates that there are different types of levels or learning that has different importance. So this clarification is that each different type of learning requires different types of instruction. So he was able to identify five major categories of learning. So the first one is what we call verbal information. It is when it is then the knowing process that something is, for example, the labels and facts, or also known as the declarative knowledge. The other one is intellectual skills. So this is a learning on how to do, or how is something done. It is also known as procedural knowledge. It includes discrimination of concrete concept role using problem solving skills. The third is the cognitive strategies, a process by which a learner controls his or her own learning by remembering and thinking behavior. And the last is the attitude. It is the internal state which affects an individual's choice of action towards some object, person, or event. So motor skills refers to the bodily movements which involving muscular activities. So Gage's theory includes the nine instructional events and corresponding cognitive processes such as reception, expectancy, retrieval, selective perception, semantic, which includes responding, reinforcement, retrieval, and generalization. So next theory is the subsumption theory of David Ausubel, which is also known as meaningful verbal learning theory. So David Ausubel is a noted or a famous American psychologist who specializes in education and learning behavior. So he introduced subsumption theory back in the 1963. So it centers on the idea that learners can more effectively acquire new knowledge if it is tied to their existing knowledge base, and that only unique information that stands out within the lesson is committed to memory. So, in this article or in this lesson, we will be dealing into the basics of subsumption theory, and then we will have our tips on how to use it in a e-learning course design or in a lesson plan. So subsumption theory is where a learner observes new information by tying it or joining it to an existing concept or ideas that they have already known or acquired. So rather than building an entirely new cognitive structure, they are able to use that information that is already present within their minds. So David Ausubel's most significant contribution to the field of education, particularly educational psychology or cognitive science, and so as the science education or the learning education, was on the development and research of the so-called graphic organizer or advanced organizer, which stipulates or stimulates the idea of a child, which is in the part of remembering, and using that knowledge to explain the current tasks that have been given to a child or a learner. So according to Osobel, meaningful learning takes place when a student gains new knowledge and they can relate the new knowledge uh, that they do not know, so or they already have. So the learners have the cognitive structure, which is in the quantity, clarity, and the organization of learners' present knowledge, such as facts, concepts, propositions, and theories. The way to strengthen the students' cognitive structure is by using advanced organizers that allow the students to already have a bird's eye view to see the big picture of subsumption is the process by which new material is related to relevant ideas in the existing cognitive structures. So to utilize or to use the subsumption theory in e-learning, it is important to identify the two types of subsumption that exist, which is correlative and derivative. So both of these forms of rote learning, which is the ability to gradually construct new cognitive behaviors and structures within the minds of the learner. So after these cognitive structures are built, the learner then has the power to use them during the so-called meaningful learning activities and exercises. So here are the different so the two types. See the correlative and the derivative. So correlative is where a learner collects new information that extends from their existing knowledge base or which elaborates upon previously acquired knowledge, and the derivative so wherein a learner derives new information directly from their cognitive structures or identifies relationships between concepts within their existing knowledge base. So this can be achieved in a variety of ways. So from shifting of information around in the hierarchical structure to linking ideas together to create new meanings. So another theory is Jerome Bruner's constructivism theory. So Jerome Brunner introduces constructivism theory using the so-called three learning modes. So the first one is enactive. So it is learning through movement or action. So for example is when a child plays with this book. The second one is iconic. So this is where the learners learn through images or icons. So for example, when a child looks at the picture, and the last is the symbolic, where learners learn through abstract symbols. So, for example, when a child is reading or researching for his school projects, such as research, examination papers, etc. So, a major theoretical framework for the so-called constructivism is that it is an active process wherein learners construct new ideas or concept based upon their current or past knowledge, wherein they will select and transform that current information that they have. Then they will make their hypothesis, make decision, and then they will revise it or relate it to the cognitive structure that they have. So cognitive structure is, for example, is the schema, the mental models, the graphs, and others. So to provide an organization or an order to the so-called experiences that they have and allow the individual to go beyond the information that is given to them by his teacher or any facilitator of learning. So as far as instruction is concerned, the instructor or the facilitator of learner should try to encourage the students to the so-called discovery learning or to discover principles by themselves. So the instructor and the student should engage in an active dialogue. So for example is the so-called Socratic method of learning. So the task of the instructor is to translate the information to be learned into a format appropriate to the learner's current state of understanding. So the curriculum should be organized in a spiral manner so that the students continually builds up upon what they have already learned. So in 1996, Brenner states that the theory of instruction should address four major aspects. So number one is the predisposition of towards learning. The second one is the ways in which a body of knowledge can be structured so that it can be most readily grasped by the learner. And the third one is that the most effective sequences in which the present material can be used. And lastly, the nature and pacing of rewards and punishment or the merit system. So good methods for structuring knowledge should result in simplifying, generating new propositions and increasing the manipulation of information. So for Jerome Brunner, there's so-called the three modes of representation. So he hypothesized that the usual course of intellectual uh, development moves in the so-called three stages that has been mentioned a while ago. So given this idea, so this instructional design was formulated by Brunner in order to give the facilitators a quick grasp upon what is the best uh, educational plan or lesson plan for his students. So he divided or make it into the three modes of representation or three stages of representation, which includes the following. So the first stage is called the inactive stage. So the knowledge is stored primarily in the form of motor response, and this is not just limited to the children. So many adults can also perform a variety of motor tasks such as typing, sewing a shirt, operating a lawnmower. So in this one, they would find difficult to describe iconic picture or symbolic word or form. So uh, for example, this works the other way around. For example, as if your own 6-year-old son has to grab the controls away to demonstrate to his inept father that you have to hold the dash key down to make the screen or the character crouch down inside or to make that object move. So the next stage is called the iconic stage. So the knowledge is stored primarily in the form of visual images or visual pictures that can be easily recognized by the learner. So this may explain why when we are learning a new subject, it is often very helpful or very intelligent to have diagrams or illustrations to accompany the verbal information. So the last stage is called the symbolic stage. So knowledge is primarily stored as words, mathematical symbols, or others. So according to Brunner's learning taxonomy, this differ from icons in that symbols are arbitrary. So for example, the word beauty is arbitrary or debatable. So it is an arbitrary designation for the idea that beauty in the word itself has no more inherently meaning that can be similar to that other than the word beauty. So an active stage. So learning begins with action. So the other one is action on physical objects, and the outcome from this action creates what we call as inactive stage. The second one is the iconic stage. It is sometimes called as pictorial stage. So this second stage involves the images or other visual objects or representation to represent the concrete situation enacted in the first stage. And the last stage is the symbolic stage, sometimes called as the abstract stage. So the last stage takes the image from the second stage and represent them using words and symbols. So another theory that has been formulated by Jerome Brunner to support his constructivism theory is called the spiral curriculum. So the spiral curriculum is based on the three levels of methods wherein the teacher and his students can use in order to make meaningful learning and active learning to the part of the so-called discovery learning and the child's capacity to learn new things. So the first level is when the student revisits a topic or a theme or a subject. And the second stage is the complexity of the topic or the theme. Increases every time the students review or revisit the information that he has known a while ago or in the past. And the last one is the level 3, which is the new learning has a relationship with the old learning and is put into context with the old information. So teachers must always revisit curriculum by teaching the same content in different ways depending on the student's capacity or developmental level. So in 1966, so Jerome Bruner states that the theory of instruction should address the four major aspects, which is the number one, the predisposition to learn, the structure of knowledge, the effective sequencing, and the reinforcement. So for Brunner's, the theory of instruction is the most critical part of the student and teacher's learning pattern. So the first stage is called the predisposition. It is to learn. This is the readiness of the students for learning. The second one is the structure of knowledge. So this refers to the ways which a body of knowledge can be structured so that it can be most readily grasped or understood by the student. The third one is the effective sequencing. This refers to the idea of revisiting basic ideas over and over, building upon them, and then elaborating to the level of full understanding and the mastery. And the last one is the so-called reinforcements. So this is the merit system of every facilitator of learning. So this includes rewards and punishments that can be selected and pays appropriately based on the student's performance and attitude. So that ends our discussion. So before we left, I will leave a quote from Mark Van Buren. So for him, the art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery. So just like what we mentioned earlier, the facilitator of learning should only facilitate learning, and the discovery of learning should be given to none other than the students. So for our references use. So that ends our discussion, and we'll see you again on our next discussion. So thank you.